Michael, can you check audio for me, please? Just say something. I'm not sure if I'm hearing.
Oh, sorry. Was that for me? Hi.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you very much, Michael.
Just as another reminder, make sure that your microphones are muted and that your camera's off. It's easier for us to keep track of our panelists that way. Okay, so I think we will get started now. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Michael Wakowiak, and I will be moderating tonight's Musical Fair Choreographer Q&A. I know some of you have probably joined us. We've done a director's one, and we also did one last month with the cast of Falsetto. So thank you for joining us today. We're specifically going to be speaking today with Musical Fair choreographers to talk about choreography, dance, and kind of all things on that creative end of the spectrum. So first I'm going to go through and introduce everyone, but just a final reminder to please be sure that your microphones are muted, your cameras are off, and we will be recording the Zoom tonight. We have some time at the end of the evening scheduled for questions. So if you have any questions that come up, you don't need to wait to the end. You can use the chat feature to submit them at any point. We'll be tracking them throughout the evening, and then we'll be sure to get to some of them at the end of the call. Please make sure your microphones are muted. And with that, we will begin by introducing the panelists. So I'm going to go in the order that I see you on my screen. First, we have Christy Shoup Kavanaugh. We have Lynn Curtzio-Formato. We have Jeffrey Demon. We have John Fredo. And Bianca Forey-Beck. Doug Wyand. Kathy Weiss-Upchurch. Michael Wallin. And Bobby Cook. Thank you all for joining us. So the first question is a bit of a lightning round to kick things off. There's kind of 3 short questions baked in here, and we're gonna go through and make sure we get all of you for this. So the question is, when did you first start dancing? What was the first show that you either, or the first show and or dance performance that you choreographed? And then what is the first show that you choreographed for Musical Fair? So for that, we'll start with Christy.
I guess you could say I started dancing out of the womb. My mom was a teacher. I think I had tap shoes before I had regular shoes. Officially started dancing, I started in class when I was 2, so long time. My first professional choreography was 2002 with the Velveteen Rabbit at Theater of Youth. And my first show at Musical Fair was 2009, Bada Bing Bada Boom. And I was super pregnant during that. So those are my answers.
Thank you. We'll go to Lynn next.
Hi. Well, I started dancing out of the womb as well, but I unfortunately did not have a mom who taught dance class. So I actually went to the library when I was old enough and took out Talia Mara's First Steps in Ballet and taught myself a ballet bar at my kitchen sink when I was very young. Then when I got to high school, I was lucky enough to meet Dorothy Hobart, who was the choreographer for South Pacific at Bishop Ryan High School, where I played Leon. And she started giving me lessons for free, and I helped with the studio and helped babysit her children, et cetera, et cetera. The first show I choreographed was Roar of the Grease Paint, Smell of the Crowd for the Appletown Players, with Neil Radis directing, and Tom Owen was Sir, and I played Kid. Long story how I got roped into that. And my first production for, I don't know if it's Musical Fair, Summer Fair, I don't know, but I think officially probably was Sweeney Todd at the KCT.
Excellent, thank you. Jeffrey?
The first dance classes I ever took were breakdancing lessons at Debonair Dance Studios when I was 12. So I guess that's when I started dancing. My first dance performance, I think that's going to be Lynn choreographing over here. I think that was my first dance performance. And then the first show that I choreographed for Musical Fair, then Summer Fair, was A Stare.
Excellent.
Starring and Bianca Fiore Beck and Catherine Upchurch, Catherine Weiss Upchurch.
There you go. Johnny? Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
I know I started at 16. Did I go away completely?
Yeah. You lost your face.
How did that happen? How did I do?
There you are.
I started at 16 like a lot of boys do because, oftentimes we're not allowed to do that until a certain age. Can't remember the first show I choreographed for some reason. I did rack my brain. I'm not quite sure. I think the first show I choreographed for Musical Fair was American Rhapsody. And that was just a few years ago. So if I'm mistaken, somebody please chime in and let me know. But, lots of years have passed through me. And there's just a lot of work there. And I don't have that kind of memory.
They'll correct you in the comment section if they remember. Anne?
Hi, everyone. I started dancing when I was 4. My mom put me at Sherry Martin School of Dance in Williamsville, New York. And I was there all the way through until college, where I luckily got to study under Lynn. And the very first intro to choreography that I had was in high school. Richard Hess was my director at Williams East High School, and another amazing Buffalo artist, Eric Jordan Young, and I were like besties in high school, and we were asked to co-choreograph Finian's Rainbow, star in it, and choreograph. So that's where I first choreographed something and fell in love with the art of creating all of that. And then the very first show I did for, I think it was Summer Fair at the time, it was at Lancaster Opera House, and it was The Boyfriend, and Sheila McCarthy directed it, and that was my first one with us.
Great, thank you. Doug?
I didn't start dancing until college, until Lynn was my first real dance teacher. So was Tommy Ralabay, who's also in the room. Hi, Tom. That was at UB. So I was 18 or 19 years old. And the first show I choreographed, I did a lot of scholastic work. I did a lot of high school and middle school shows, Orchard Park, Sweet Home, City Honors, that kind of thing. And then my first choreographed show for Summer Fair / Musical Fair were, sorry, Kath, I have to steal the answer. The first thing I choreographed was with Kathy. We did Godspell at the Pfeiffer Theater in like 97. And then the first thing I did after that by myself was the review Secrets Every Smart Traveler Should Know, which was just like a year or so after that, I think. So that's where that went.
Thank you. I like the term scholastic work. That makes it sound
Thank
a lot fancier. Kathy?
Okay. Hi. So let's see. I started dancing when I was about 5, and I was my first choreographic endeavor was when I was in 3rd grade, and I directed and choreographed our Christmas play. And then my first professional job I did was with Doug, and that was Godspell, and that was at the Pfeiffer Theater.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Michael?
So I'm kind of like Doug. I started dancing in college. I was an architecture major, and then I took body movement for actors with Miss Lynn, and changed my life forever. Quit architecture and got a degree in musical theater, which I love and use every single day. The first professional show I did was Annie Get Your Gun for AK Productions at the Lancaster Opera House with Tony Kalinowski. And the first show I choreographed for Musical Fair was Pippin in 2000. So yeah.
And there is still a photo of that by the bathroom in the dressing rooms. Because when you say that, that's where my mind goes to immediately, is there's a picture right by the bathroom. And Bobby?
I started dancing. Actually, I was one of the few that was lucky enough when we had gym, they did square dancing. And so I started dancing in gym class. And I was like, this is really fun. My first professional choreography was The Sound of Music at Flat Rock Playhouse. And my first choreography for Musical Fair was Oliver.
Excellent. Thank you all. So now we're gonna move into the second question, which again is gonna kind of look back to probably a moment more from your childhood. Is, can any of you pinpoint the moment in your life when you first noticed storytelling through dance and movement? I feel like that's, I'm sure for all of you, I'm sure you can think of that one thing that you saw where you first realized kind of the power and the potential in this art form. Is there anyone? Lynn?
So because I'm old, there wasn't YouTube or the things that are available now. So Sunday afternoons were sacrosanct watching old movie musicals, usually on PBS. I don't even know it was called PBS then, but I know it was Channel 17. So watching Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, all of the old movie musicals, which are all dance storytelling. So that for me was what hooked me big time.
Jeffrey?
Went to St. Joe's for high school, and obviously Lynn worked there and became hugely important to me, but also Jim Diot taught a musical theater class after school. And this is kind of a two-part answer. I'll try to make it brief, but Jim showed us West Side Story, and we delved into that idea, obviously, West Side Story being one of the most famous examples of storytelling through movement. But I want to say, and I'm not just trying to, shine your shoes here, Lynn, but Lynn as a choreographer always worked that way. And so I don't even remember like dance without storytelling. It was like, well, yeah, duh. Well, of course you would. Why would you do anything else? But having that practical experience with Lynn and then seeing it presented in such a seminal piece as West Side Story really shows the kind of the whole picture. So that's high school.
Yeah. Christy?
Mine goes back, I was lucky enough at the age of 5 to be in Carousel at Art Park. And I remember every night we would sneak back, we weren't supposed to, but we would sneak backstage to watch the ballet. And I remember having a vivid conversation with my mom one night in the car and being like, it's so cool how they become the carousel horses, like the men. And it's, it's in the movie, it's in everything. And I just remember like being in total awe of these ballerinas and dancers that they became carousel horses. And my mom saying to me, that's what dance can lead to. It's just not in the studio. It's, you can use this to tell stories. And I can still picture myself as a little child, like just looking at these dancers on that big stage where we weren't supposed to be, but every night we watch that same part and thinking like, wow, if, this is something I keep doing, I eventually can, tell that same story by movement. And I mean, it's still one of my favorite moments as a kid that I can still picture them doing that part of that show.
I mean, West Side and Carousel are probably two of the best examples I can think of specifically using movement to forward the story. Anne?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was with Lynn that watching movie musicals growing up and just seeing how Gene Kelly even and Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse and all these people. In fact, this is my home. And on the wall is Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse right next to me as I'm speaking. So always has been an inspiration. But yeah, West Side Story was mine. It was the very first time, just 20 minutes in, not one word being spoken, yet theme, plot, characters, everything, and all you've heard is the random pow. So that was definitely mine for sure.
Michael, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I came from, so I'm the youngest of 6, and I have 3 older sisters who all figure skated. And for me, figure skating was such this beautiful blend of artistry and athleticism. And growing up, you know, I was a baseball kid and a football kid, and my sisters would figure skate, and I just was enamored by it. And I had parents that were enamored by the Olympics. So they would gather all 6 kids around, and we would watch the figure skating of the Olympics. And that was the first true storytelling. And for me, and a few of you know this, that when Torval and Dean won the 1984 gold medal performing Bolero, that is one of the seminal moments of my life when thinking about the relationship of athleticism, art, and storytelling through movement.
Amazing. Johnny, I think you had something?
Are we there? Okay. I just keeps bringing forth the adage, you know, when speaking isn't enough, sing. When singing isn't enough, dance. And once you sort of understand that sort of the way it's set up, when a person gets the chance to dance, they get to tell the story in a completely different way and elevate it to another place. And I think that's the thing that I've always loved and always thought was the most wonderful thing to watch. That's all I have to say.
I don't know who said it. I'm sure it's a quote that's been said by many people, but they say, you know, in a musical, when someone can't speak anymore, they should sing. But I almost feel it then even goes a step further, is that when they can't get it out with words anymore, they have to dance, and they have to use movement, which kind of brings it to a whole nother level. Anybody else have anything on this before we move to the next question? Okay. So we can move to our next question, which is getting more into the process of choreography. And I even saw some questions in the chat already kind of surrounding this. Everyone's got a different pre-production process. So before you're actually in the room teaching the numbers, how do you begin to work on each number? And then do you have any, the word tricks makes it sound more trivial, but kind of tricks for developing the number in your head or on the page before you actually have those bodies in front of you, because often you could be dealing with anywhere from like 5 bodies to 30 bodies. And so what's kind of that process like to work on that before you actually are in the room? Doug?
Weirdly, well, I was trained by Lynn. I write everything down. Some choreographers, and some of you are like this, you can work very, very well off the top of your head, as I'm sure Lynn can as well. Not my strong point. I can, fix things that I've done, but I really need to have it like sort of mapped out for myself when I start. And generally, I'll write it down, and it depends on the show. If it's a really big show with a lot of people, then I usually start with the bigger numbers and work my way down. If it's not a huge show and it's not like super hard choreography, if it's more character-based, smaller movement, then I try to do the entire show in chronological order to try to keep a through line for the actors. So it depends on the circumstance, but I want to make sure I'm not jumping ahead on another question, but yeah, that's the next question. But that's how I have to do it, because if I try to like improv it myself, even if the dancers can pick it up in front of me, then I go, I don't know if I like that I did that. Like, it freaks my mind out a little bit. So that's why my process is skewed that way. Someone else?
Anne?
I'm going to bandwagon on the Lynn train here too, but I just, I assisted her so much and would be her dance captain. And so I just learned, and I would watch her and I would study her, and it was just so fascinating. And I think one of the first things I do once I know, I'll go into like a specific song as opposed to the whole show, like one specific piece. Of course, there's the initial, do your research. What time frame are you in? What's the social things going on? What's the cultural events happening? Where do the characters have to get from point 1 to point 2, the beginning of the song to the end of the song? Working with the production team to see, where does this song fit right in the whole piece. But I'm the same way, Doug. I write everything down. Graph paper used to be my go-to because graph paper is like, you can see all the formations changing and it's like, you know, measure 1, formation 1, measure 18, formation 2. So I can literally see the people moving. Now, technology, it took me a long time, but technology, there's some apps out there now that I've actually like, there's one that I like that doesn't ever delete things by accident. It's called Choreo, ! And it actually is cool because you can upload like the whole cast once, and then you have them to like pull from, and you can see like the morphing. So like if they're starting in this position and then you want to like expand them, you like see the formation moving, and it's very satisfying to me as a choreographer. I don't know. Yeah, I write everything down, and I've always said like I give such props to people that can go in and wing it. But she drilled in me to always like have a plan. You know, it's also a respect to actors and the direction team and everyone else that you don't want to waste their time. And Lynn never wasted anyone's time, and she was always really productive. I learned collaboration from her, that you might go in with a plan too, but still be willing to change. If some actor is like, or a dancer is like really great at one thing, feature their strengths and things like that, which is another question that I won't get into because I don't want to ruin your plan, Michael. So yeah, I just wanted to bandwagon off what Doug said. That's it.
I think Bobby had his hand up.
My first thing that I do, and I'm talking strictly just as a choreographer, not as a director choreographer, is sit down and have a really cool conversation with the director. And I've always done this. What do you want the number to say? How do you want the number to move? How should this character, how does the character, it's the same thing everybody else has said. But once I know what the director's doing, so since my job is to tell the story through movement and support their story, how they want to tell it in a collaboration, once I get that, then generally I am one of those people that puts those thoughts down on a piece of paper, and I am the same way. I write everything down. I just have always done that. But finding those ideas and finding those themes that the director and I have spoken about, and then letting it happen through my body. I listen to music and songs over and over and over again in the car, backwards, forwards, until I really, really know the music and start to feel it, and then I let the characters come through however it goes. But I find that I always start with the director's conversation.
Excellent. I think, Jeffrey, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I don't want to mow over the same lawn because we're almost all students of Lynn's, so we're all going to have, you know, the lineage. I did find as I, what's that?
It said lineage, a pun there. I like it.
Lineage. That would be the Buffalo version of Jerome Robbins' Broadway. Lineage.
Lineage.
Done. We're producing it at Musical Fair next year.
Hey, we got nothing else to do. We could do it now.
Right? I did find, as I developed as a choreographer, and some of the directors that I started to work with, that, and I think that there's this question about collaboration, which is another thing, but I found that I would have a lot of things set, and then the auditions would happen, and I would see all of these wonderful actors and dancers and singers, and sometimes my stuff wouldn't fit them. And I'm sure that everyone in the room here does the same thing. But what I've now kind of settled on is, before I get into rehearsal, I like to have between 65 and 75% of it mapped out. But I like to leave like maybe 25% completely not even looked at. Like I don't even think about it. And then I try to, kind of what Anne said, see who I have, see what their strengths are, see what their weaknesses are. Because I found, and I think everyone would agree with this as well, the more the actors and the dancers and the singers can take ownership of that movement and feel as though it was created for them, the better the show is. And so that's kind of a little bit of my process now.
Lynn?
So yes, I absolutely agree with Jeff. and as you get older, you're also more willing to, I think, listen and give up control. Sometimes when you're younger, you want to be good. And so you try to maintain control over everything. But I think the older you get, you recognize that, that it's important for the collaboration of everyone to leave some of that open breathing space to get the best show that you possibly can. Everybody here knows that I have little people in my head, and that's where I start always. Something that I read, something that I listen to will give me ideas, and it all just happens in my head, already lit, already costumed, in formations, etc., etc. But obviously the collaboration, I've been working on a lot of big shows in different places, and you sometimes start 2 years out collaborating with your colleagues. So scenic design, impacts what you do. Things that the costume designer bring to you will impact what you can do. The size of the house, and always, again, the talent of the dancers and the performers. And if I'm only the choreographer, and most of us here know that the choreographer usually, like I know most directors I work with, anything that has 5 people or more is in the choreographer's purview. So you end up staging a large part of the show. And so you do need to have those conversations with the director to also be able to incorporate their vision if you're not also directing and choreographing. And sometimes they will bring things to the table that you never thought of and take you in a completely new direction, which is very exciting. So, and I do write everything down. I score out all the music and I study the score. Even looking at the score for musical instruments, they tell you there's cues in the music. There's themes and motifs that repeat themselves over and over that belong to specific characters. It tells you if you're doing a Latin number. It tells you if it's a love, it's going to be in 3/4, if people are falling in love, et cetera, et cetera. So you really, if you're choreographing, you're sort of delving into that score and studying it to mine for the resources that are there on the page and in the script. And then, of course, everybody puts their own concepts to things. So you hopefully do it different than someone else. I will shut up now.
No, never. There was a follow-up question in the chat, which I actually think is great pertaining to this, because so many of you said, writing it down. And so what does that look like for you? Is like, do you have certain, like a certain way about it? I think I saw Doug, and then we'll go to Christy.
Well, really briefly, I'll just answer the question like sort of in layman's terms, and Christy can probably elaborate more. But when we say write it down, it's literally things like we'll draw formations of people on a piece of paper and then transfer that to the stage. We'll count out the music by measures or by dancer counts, 1 through 8 or 1 through 6 or whatever, and write down the movement we want to do within those counts, taking up the counts one at a time or using the and counts, et cetera, stuff like that. How we're going to transition them on and off stage, or how we're going to change a set. All that stuff has to be usually plotted out for yourself to teach, otherwise you're wasting time all day. But Christy?
Well, along the same lines as, a lot of people think a lot of us grew up with Lynn and, looking at her notes, but I also was very lucky to, my first dance teacher was Bev Fletcher, who had me mapping music at like the age of 8. So for those of you who don't know her, she was a tap teacher in Niagara Falls, worked at Niagara University, but besides my teacher, she was a family friend. So I literally learned what she called mapping I was doing it like at 8. Like, this is the stuff that we did at Christmas. You'd go to her house and so also she taught us shorthand. And it's very interesting because I still use that. And a lot of times will have actors say to me, "Can I see your notes?" And I say, "You can look at them, but you will not understand them." And I'm sure a lot of other people have had that, actors saying, "Hey, can I make a copy of your notes so I can go home?" And I always say, "Yeah, but good luck." Because like step ball change is XBC, and we all have our own way of writing things so it doesn't take up as much space. But I am a color coordinator, like everything's colored. I do a lot of high school shows where I have 65, 75 kids on stage. And sometimes like 8 counts of 8 takes up 7 pieces of paper because it's, this group's doing this, and I like my colors. I never leave home without my Sharpies for any rehearsal, but mapping, and I think our shorthand is what we mean by writing it down. But really all of us, probably all 9 of us, have our own way of writing our own stuff. Like, it's just what we write so that we understand it. And most of them, you know, most humans out there will not understand it. So that's, I think, what we all, and everyone's going, uh-huh.
Well, I mean, as long as you can understand what it means the next time you read it, that's all that really matters.
But it's super funny because I'm sure all of you have had some actors say, hey, can I take those notes to the photocopier? And you go, sure.
You can, but
Yeah. But I do tell my students all the time, like, figure out a way to write it down that makes sense to you. I know a lot of actors like will write over their measures in their music. If they're a music person or if they're a visual person, they make little stick figures, but we do definitely have our own version of shorthand.
Michael?
I was going to say, you know, some choreographers choreograph to the beat of the music, some choreograph to the lyrics of the song, some choreograph to an internal beat that none of the actors can see or feel. So there's a lot of shorthands that we all do use. I personally this is one tool that I have to make a schematic of looking above the stage, and then I have to draw everything out. And usually I work with unit stages a lot at MusicalFare's. So I'll make 50 copies of that. And for every different measure of music or every different combination or formation change or tableau, I will draw it out, and then I'll put it in a notebook, and then I can just refer to that with the measures of the music or the lyrics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Anything else on that before we kind of move to the next step of the process? So from there, we're going to move into the actual rehearsal room, and when you begin to, besides the collaboration that you spoke of ahead of time with the director and with any of the designers to kind of understand what your space is going to look like, what the feel of the piece is going to be, how do you then foster that collaborative relationship in the rehearsal room? And then what, oh, now I can't, I lost my place, sorry. How do you go about staging a musical number or a larger musical sequence? Whoever would like to take this one first. Bobby?
I think one of the first things, depending on how large your cast is or how big your cast is, I like Christy. I work at a bunch of schools. I think is the sense of getting the actors' trust, knowing that you're going to throw them into these dance sequences and make sure that my job is to make you look good, and to know that I am willing to work with you and that I'm willing to try it my way, and or try whatever we set, and then if it doesn't work, like, let's change it and let's work it. And I think if you allow the actors and the performers to come in feeling like they have got a part in it, rather than being talked to and this is how it's going to be, I think that helps. I think that sets up a positive atmosphere in the room. And I'm actually going to pick Michael Wallin. One of my favorite things that he does with the start of any of his shows that he's directed that I've been fortunate enough to be in, is at the end of the rehearsal, he asks, how do you feel about that? Or how did you feel, like, what went well for you? And that conversation really, really helps everybody just settle. And for me, when it gets to teaching a musical number or a sequence, I like to start at the beginning and go through it. Unless there's a really difficult part in the middle, this like really hard dance break, then I'm going to start with that at the beginning of the night. Because by the time you get to the end of the night and everybody's tired, it just sort of goes away. So I tend to hit the big things first and make everybody feel good about it.
Anne?
This kind of marries the last question with this one, but I think it's a very different process, at least for me, when you are dealing with a group of people who you're walking into and you've traveled to go work with them. So you don't know them prior. Then as opposed to people like if I just did a show and I was working with everybody and I know their strengths and I know their weaknesses and I know how to kind of feature people or get from point A to point B a little bit easier. So I think that there is, what Bobby said, there is a lot of trust that needs to go into that, especially when you're traveling with people and you're just like, here's the cast, but you have no idea really who these people were. Sometimes that's happened to me too, where I haven't even been the one in on the audition processes just because of like schedules and things like that. So you like watching videos, which is very different than watching in person as we're learning in today's world. But I also too, I love when I'm just the choreographer choreographing a piece and having that director there so that we can, you know, there's that constant collaboration. I think it's kind of good for the whole room and the whole production team and for the cast as well to kind of see that there's one joint voice, but then our individual voices as well. And I think that kind of tends to work well. And I love collaborating with the director. I love rehearsal. I've always loved rehearsal from both sides of the table.
Jeffrey?
Oh man, it's a couple years back now. It might almost be 10 years. I was introduced to Viewpoints, which is Anne Bogart and Tina Landau created these viewpoints. Viewpoints is not something that anyone was created, and Anne and Tina would admit to this. They would say it's not created. It's something that every artist, no matter what they do, uses. It's a way of approaching art using different points of view. And the first thing that I like to do, kind of piggybacking on Bobby and Anne in terms of creating trust, if I have the time, because sometimes we don't have the time, but if I have the time, I like to spend the first day doing at least an hour and a half to 2 hours of viewpoints exercises, which is basically taking the cast and pulling them together using viewpoints, using what people might call theater games. But what it does is it bonds them, first of all. Second of all, it shows them that everything is okay. No matter what you do, no matter how you do it, no matter how you perform it, it's okay. The room is a safe space. There's not going to be any, ridiculing of, oh, you screwed up or anything like that. That being goofy, that using your imagination, being willing to fall, and then supporting each other is how the room is going to be run. And that's like the base rule. From there, anything can really happen. And you have built a way to speak to the audience, or the actors through viewpoints, that you can build things very, very quickly, staging, moving transitions with very little fuss, without having to do every single person's track. You can go, okay, we're all going to move on a grid, and we're going to move at a tempo of about 5 to 6, and then we're going to stop halfway, and we're going to go into a 2, and then we're going to move on a curved arc, and then exit. And you can just make that happen, and something beautiful is going to occur because you have all of these wonderful artists who are now being kind of engined and fueled into creating on their own. So I love that. I think it's invaluable. And it does set up a good kind of first rehearsal day thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to start the room, because even if it's the most comfortable room in the world, an actor's always going to have that thing at the back of their brain saying, like, that's a bad choice, even though you need to get that out of you. So I think that's a great way to kind of just even it out and have everybody kind of come in on the same footing. Anybody else want to speak on this? Johnny or Kathy, Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. It's dance is such a language, and we all kind of speak the same language, but we all have different styles within that. And I started dancing at 19, and I've worked with people that started dancing at 4. So they have a much different language than I do. So for me to come into a rehearsal and say, I know everything, I'm missing out on the opportunity to hear and utilize someone else's language to tell the story. So I'm very lucky to have started dance at 19, but I'm also really lucky because there are a lot of performers, especially in Buffalo, who know how to utilize movement, and not just dance, movement, gestural, pedestrian movement as well, as part of a story language. Because a lot of audiences sometimes have difficulty with dance because it is such a foreign language. So I try to incorporate all these different voices into the rehearsal process. I do set that expectation right from the get-go. I do say, I don't know everything. I need your help, and I want your help. And that helps from the get-go to establish that trust and confidence from both sides.
Absolutely. I think this can kind of go, we've kind of touched on this. So just to kind of wrap up this sort of portion of the questioning, we've had some references to occasionally, whether it be, occasionally an actor will be cast in a role, but they're otherwise perfect for, but they're just not a great dancer, or they're, you know, they have issue with movement. How do you approach that in the rehearsal room? And we've kind of touched on this a bit. Lynn, if you want to go first.
So it really, it depends on the show and the situation. There are some shows where dance is a primary talent that's necessary for the character to speak. Michael was just talking about the language of dance. For example, An American in Paris. You have to have dancers in those roles. In a chorus line, their occupation is dance, so you have to have dancers. So those shows, if there is someone cast in those shows, you have to push them to come up to the point where they look like dancers. I mean, in American in Paris, you couldn't be one of the leads if you can't dance. But in most other shows, if the character is not a dancer and not necessary to speak as a dancer, then you develop movement that is suitable for the character, that makes the actor look good. Because somebody had mentioned this earlier, but a major part of your job as a choreographer is to make movement that is right for the actors that are in your show, that tell the story. And because musical theater can utilize so many different idioms, there is not just one, usually not just one route to go. You can pull from a number of different places. You can make up something new, and you know, you usually can make it work. But there are some times where you cannot cast someone, even if they are perfect in every way, unless they dance. But it's show by show.
Kathy, I think you have your hand up.
A second. Okay. I'm interested in what she just said, because I agree with that. I generally, especially the musicals that I've worked at MusicalFare for, I have done a lot of smaller ones, and usually they're not the big dance flashy ones, but they are using a lot of actor or singer, then dancers. And I found that it's really more exciting at times to work with somebody who doesn't have a big dance background, because what they bring to it is they just bring a whole different. Sometimes I come in with the movement that I think, you know, I want them to do, and then, but they have this layer because they don't have the same language that I do for dance, but what they come up with is perfect. You know, it adds that little extra to it. So it doesn't necessarily, if it is a big dance show, you need a big dancer, but other than that, you know, you just kind of work with what you got, and you get some really interesting results.
Michael?
I'd love seeing different body types move through space. It's so cool. I mean, I'm 6'1", 255, and I'm built like a football player, and I love doing chaîné turns across the stage. Yeah. I think it's beautiful. I think it's, you know, the smallest of the small, the biggest of the big, as long as an audience can see themselves on stage. I think that that's so vitally important, and I learned that through doing children's theater at Theater of Youth. Audience really needs to see themselves on stage. It hits here, it hits the soul, it hits the brain. It's so important that they do. And I'd love the opportunity to have someone older with someone younger, someone bigger with someone smaller, because it's this culmination of this really awesome melting pot that theater provides to an audience, you know, that they can see themselves. And I find that that's, especially nowadays, it's vitally important that we have those melting pots represented on stage.
Yeah. And your audience is going to have a different reaction if they can actually see themselves, as opposed to having to see themselves through the veil of somebody that they can identify with. Anybody else? Johnny?
Just to jump off from what Michael said, Michael said something to me very, very important. Probably I'd say about 10 years ago. you know, as dancers and anybody who comes up in this world, you know, oftentimes there's body image issues and things like that. And I would make some off the cuff comment and Michael will just look at me and say, John, just love the body you're in. And that was really, really important to me. And then once we're freed up with that, that's it. I think we also get approached by many, many cast members in shows where you have one sensibility of a group that say, dance me, just do whatever you're going to do. I want to dance. That's the way it's going to be. That all of that. And then there's another contingency that says, you know, in their way, you know, give me something that I can work with. Give me something that I can do. And keeping all of those balls in the air sometimes is not the easiest thing to do, and still have somebody come out perhaps a little bit more importantly because they're part of the storyline that is more important. But it's always very interesting and always very exciting when everybody sort of gets on that page and everybody starts to understand what their part in it is. And sometimes it's just our job to make sure that, you know, we're not stepping on anything. That to me is very, very important.
Absolutely. Kind of in the vein of this same question, this is me jumping down a bit. Do you feel that it's easier or harder to find, you know, well-trained dancers now as opposed to the beginning of your career? I think that's an interesting question that opens up the concept of kind of some of the training programs, whether they be conservatory or otherwise. Doug, I think you're unmuted, so I'll let you go.
I was going to say Anne was first, but whatever. Okay, so I can't speak for big cities because bigger cities obviously have more people in them and more dancers in them. And I'm going to tread lightly a little bit here, but locally, it's a damn pain in the ass to try to find trained dancers. And I don't mean dancers. I don't mean dancers who went through like a dance program or dance studio. I mean people who are trained in any sort of musical theater. Dance collectively, especially guys, and it's always been that way with guys in Buffalo because, you know, it's a smaller city. But when I look around now, I can literally say there's less than 5 guys in town right now, if you were to hire them for a musical, that have any sort of dance training at all. Less than 5, which when I was their age, there was maybe 10, which is still not a lot. But Lynn is the one who trained all of them, right? And Lynn is the one who not only trained all of us then. The ridiculous thing is Lynn was at UB for a long time and then left and was down in North Carolina, et cetera. But when she left, it sort of like opened this gaping hole in the university and college system where while there were still programs, they weren't necessarily, they were teaching you how to dance, but they weren't teaching you the abstract behind it. They weren't teaching you the concept. They were teaching you like, here's a combination, but why? They weren't, and it became very much that if you needed a male dancer, you were literally going to like the dance program and seeing if you could say, can I grab this guy from Zodiac to try to be in our musical, because we don't have any guy dancers in town who can actually do basic musical theater movement or even a stylized musical theater movement. And it's gotten very, very bizarre. And a lot of the time they leave town now, and they always did. But and when you're in a bigger city, you have, you know, bigger opportunities, although you'd actually work more here. But that's a whole other story. But casting it is always hard. And guys are the hardest part. Bigger cities, and you can address or whatever you say.
And you had your hand up.
Well, I think it also depends. I feel Doug's pain that right now I'm in Indianapolis and I work full-time at a theater that we're always trying to cast, community theater, and then I also work full-time at a university. So I am doing that all the time, Doug. I'm always like, okay, what university shows, who's in what shows at school so that I can pool and bring over to the theater to get experience in a different way, because I do feel that is difficult. Another point I wanted to say, though, that I do think that since from years back when reality television shows started, I do think more kids are interested in doing this. I feel like the flooding of wanting to find a BFA program kind of happened in the last decade or so. And there are a lot of training programs, I feel like, that I've become more and more, just from recruitment for BFA programs in general, you kind of learn about all these different performing arts programs across the country. And I also think that as far as casting shows, I think that the older I get, the more I open my mind to what a dancer needs to look like, that I can pool, especially in the community theater world. There's a lot of their nurses and doctors and teachers and things. And so it's kind of a huge joy to kind of watch like the more pedestrian movement and see how far I can take them with their dance, and then bring that kind of skill set up to match some of the other things. So I think that dance, sometimes I've instead of everybody needing to have perfect ballet technique, that it's been more of a broad spectrum to say, you know, more bodies in space, and exactly what Michael Walling was saying earlier, that more bodies are able to do so, and how interesting. And I always think about, I don't know if anyone's seen Hadestown, but that ensemble in Hadestown is the strong man from Greatest Showman, and the Little Peanut, and it's like every body under the sun, and it's beautiful because of that. And it's not a ton of space, but like it's every skin color, every body type, and moving kind of pedestrian, but you can tell that they have movement background, but no one's feet are pointed and no one cares. And that story is being told so well. So that's my example in today's theater.
Absolutely. I can co-sign Hadestown. Lynn, I think you had your hand up.
So there's a lot of things. I think that if you're working in a big market, as people mentioned, there are a large number of dancers to choose from. There's so many talented people in this country and in Europe and in South America that you leave auditions crying that you don't have jobs for each and every one of them, because there's so much talent. But there is still a stigma against men dancing, to address one of Doug's issues. And you need to have adults who are in positions of teaching the arts, encouraging them. Encouraging both men and women, but for some reason it's still, you go into a dance class and there will be 12 little girls and 1 little boy if you're lucky. And you know, you need to have people that tell you, yes, you can do this. You know, you're really good at this. Why don't you give this a shot? You need that kind of encouragement for young men to get into this biz, especially locally.
Absolutely. I remember I was in Stratford and I happened to be seeing Billy Elliot the day that all of that stuff came out with Good Morning America, with the kind of like making the joke about the boy dancer, and watching all of those kids and especially the young boys do it. You were just taken with it, again, to what Ann said and what Lynn was saying, that if you can't see it, if you're not told you can do it, many people, especially if they're underprivileged, just won't ever think they can. So that's extremely important. Christy?
Feeding off what Lynn said about finding people to educate. I work in a high school locally, been there 17 years, and we've gone through a period of 6 boys versus 60 girls. But I do feel there's an uprise if you have the right people on your staff. My show this past year, we had a cast of 55, 25 were boys, 30 were girls. And I've told my kids, my goal is to have equal amount of boys and girls, and we were only 5 off this year, which I think is probably unheard of in a high school. But I think, like, we went through a period of musical directors. We finally have one, and he's out there preaching choir, getting them into theater classes. And I think, like, now if we can get them to stay and get them off to college, I mean, what a beautiful thing that would be. But I think now that there is more arts in this, even in, I mean, a local high school, it's a public high school. I mean, he's got 5 choirs, 1 is all boys. So I think there is that uprise now again, with getting the youth back in. But, like, you know, to have a cast of 25 guys and 30 girls is like unheard of.
That's
so there is that, and we can only hope that, you know, and all of them did take my dance class all fall. So it's great. It's great to see that, because you can actually do partnering in a high school.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny?
I have a question for my fellow choreographers that do high school musicals. When I was coming up, even though there was a disproportionate amount of men to women, there were at least, out of the 30 girls that were in the show, 25 of them were taking dance class somewhere. And nowadays, it seems to me that when I have been confronted with younger people in large casts, it seems as though there's less and less people going to dance school, and more often a lot of females that aren't going to dance school. So oftentimes a choreography has to lend itself towards something that is a little different than a dance trained basis. I'd love to hear somebody's response on that.
I can jump on that. You do find, you know, every year you have like the 12 girls that want to be the featured dancers, and you know, but it's also getting harder because kids that dance nowadays are in the studio 4 or 5 days a week, and then you ask them to be at a musical rehearsal 4 to 5 days a week. So a lot of times your dancers that are committed to their competition teams don't end up doing musical. They opt to stay in the studio, but which is fine. You know, that's a different choice. But I am blessed. I've been at, I'll give a shout out, Williamsville North, thanks to Lynn. I've been there 17 years, and I actually started 17 years ago with a dance gym program that was suited just for boys. We did West Side Story. I had 3 dance classes a day of all boys. Kept that up for a few years. Funding, you know, was cut, but I teach there from September to October. Well, September to November, after school program. And I have kids. It's awesome because I have kids that are dancers, and then I have kids that have never danced in their life. And I get to teach them basic musical theater, and then I prepare them for whatever show we're doing. If we're doing a tap show, we work on tap. If we're doing, you know, depending on the show, we work on certain things, and then I'm able to have those kids audition, and 95% of the time, all of them are in like a huge dance number. I am blessed with that. I know a lot of high schools don't have that, but I have kids. I did 42nd Street my second year there. I had kids who never tapped do that opening number to 42nd Street. So it is, you know, you have to find ways to, you know, but you don't have those dancers because they're competition and they're, you know, doing ballet 7 days a week. So you do have to just teach them. You have to be able to get in there and teach, which is awesome. But
it,
you know,
it is, if I can just jump in, but I'm just saying, how does it inform as people are starting to do theater, especially in a town like Buffalo, especially in other places? It then becomes sometimes the fact that, you know, a lot of people are going to college or trying to get in, young people trying to get into shows, not really having the same kind of full dance background that a lot of folks used to, I guess.
Doug?
Yeah, and it's really just making it full circle back to my original point. I mean, I totally have no problem, and I think that's awesome that we're able to teach people, like, if they don't, you know, to make people be better dancers if they weren't dancers in the first place. But I'm talking about, like, trying to find guys or trying to find even dancers anymore, is that I choreographed a show at an unnamed school a couple of years ago, and graduating seniors at a college level didn't know how to do a basic soft shoe break. And then they would do it like a pony. So you had to teach them, but they're graduating seniors in musical theater. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about. Like, they're also going through a program to get to a point where they should be able to do things and can't still, which is frightening and also a waste of some money. But on top of that, I'm totally for, like, if you have pedestrian kids who are just all willing to do it and they are absorbed like sponges, or even if they don't absorb like sponges and they need a while, that's great. But I think at a point, if you're going to be hiring people to be in professional shows, paid shows, they should at least have some sort of idea of basic movement steps to be considered a little bit, if that makes sense.
Great, yeah. Thank you all. That was all very, very interesting. I'm going to move it back to kind of questions about you personally. For all of you, what is your favorite style of dance, and does that differ from your favorite style to choreograph? Which I think is an interesting question. Kathy?
Okay, so my favorite style to actually dance, whether I do it well or not, I love ballroom. I just adore it. And but it is my least favorite to ever choreograph. Usually, I'm always trying to drag somebody out and try to practice on them so that I can choreograph. That's a very difficult thing. You know, when you're trying to do it on your own, it's really hard to choreograph that. And then, but my favorite to choreograph, I would say, it's not something I get to do often either. I like to do contemporary. I think that's very interesting, and I'm never asked to do it. But which is not a big deal, but I think that's fun. That's so creative to me. But yeah, that's my answer.
Great. Anybody else wanna? Michael?
I love modern dance. I love it so much. And I find that that's my foundation for a lot of my musical theater work, or at least a lot of my storytelling, depending on the show that I'm doing. Like the last show I did was Elf, and that was a lot of, high energy tap and musical theater. But the show I did before that was Late in the Evening, the Paul Simon show I wrote, which was 100% storytelling through modern dance. And there's just there's an earthy quality to it. And I think seeing people how they move through the space utilizing modern dance, whether it be on their feet or their hands or their knees or anything like that, there's this weight to it that just draws me to the storytelling aspect of it. I love it so much.
Jeffrey?
I think when you look back at classic musical theater, and especially like classic movie musicals, they were drawing from so many different sources. And I find it hard to express myself better than using classical musical theater, jazz, and contemporary, to a certain extent, based movement. You take a look at what they were doing, Jack Cole and Bob Fosse and Michael Kidd and Anna White, what they were doing, Agnes DeMille, what they were doing back then was revolutionary. They were just blowing people's minds. And then I also like crumping. Sorry. Joke for the choreographers in the room. No, but classic musical theater, I don't know that I love contemporary, to back up what Michael was saying. And my UB training really helped me get an appreciation for that. But when it comes to gun to my head, I got to choreograph a number that's going to blow people away, it's probably going to be classic musical theater.
Excellent. Lynn?
If I am dancing myself, I think my favorite form of dance is jazz for me, for my body and for what moves me. And jazz is not just one thing. I mean, there's Afro jazz, there's Latin jazz, there's classic jazz, there's Luigi and Fosse and blah, blah, blah. So I love jazz dance. But for me, the choreographer who I think is still the king of kings is Jerome Robbins. And Jerome Robbins, if you put 3 of his shows next to one another, you really can't tell that he did all 3. So the form of dance that I love to choreograph is whatever is necessary for that specific project that I'm working on. So, if you're doing Tarzan, it's a very different vocabulary of dance and dance forms than if you are doing Thoroughly Modern Millie. And I love all of them, and that's why I love musical theater, because you don't have to pick just one.
100%. Anybody else want to chime? Christy?
I'm a musical theater baby. Grew up as a jazz baby, love to perform. I don't perform anymore, but musical theater was my thing. But I'm also a tap baby. And I'm sure Jeff is smiling. That's what I do. I put my shoes on. I love to choreograph tap. I'm really kind of bummed because I was supposed to be doing nice work, if you can get it, at Musical Fair in September with my tap shoes. So, we are hopefully doing it, in the future, but that is like my go-to is to, get out those tap shoes. And again, because they were my first pair of shoes ever. So choreographing tap is, my thing to do.
Michael?
Can I just share a story? I was just thinking about this as I look at John. So I love modern dance, and Randy asked me to choreograph Cabaret a few years ago, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do a different take on Cabaret instead of doing the Fosse stuff. So what I did was I can't believe I did this. I based the entire show on German folk dances of the early 20th century, and I drilled the cast and these really intricate dances, these folk dances, and it was pretty much universally panned because everyone wanted Fosse.
Well,
So,
you committed to it, and
I committed
to the bit.
I totally did, and John can attest to it. And God love you, John, for doing it. But yeah, I thought it was funny.
I think that's a good segue into this question, which is just if any of you have a favorite show or dance or sequence that you've either choreographed or been a part of over the years that really just sticks with you. Doesn't even necessarily need to be your favorite, but the one that has kind of the most lasting impression on you. Bobby?
This goes back to actually when I started Michael Kidd's sequence in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the barn raising, made me want to do this. And I still, like, if Seven Brides for Seven Brothers or I hear it's on, I run and I watch that sequence. All of my high schoolers have seen it or learned the dance or parts of the dance, because I think it just shows how athleticism and everything works together. And I could watch that sequence over and over and over and over again and never get bored of it.
Doug?
I don't necessarily know that I have a specific sequence. I guess my whole thing is really that what does it for me is the moment when I'm watching the actors that I've worked with and it clicks for them. And that does not mean that the number necessarily is clean or correct yet, but you see that, oh, they get it now. Like, it's not the steps, they get the feel, they get the concept, they get everything all at the same time, and you know it is still gonna grow and it's still gonna get better. But that moment when it clicks, whether it's in a show as simple as, like, there's not a lot of choreography next to normal, but when you see the movement patterns in that come together, or something as fluid and bizarre as Spring Awakening can be, or something with puppets like Avenue Q, or guys in heels like in Pageant, you're still always waiting for the moment where you go, yep, there it is. There it is. And that magic that always hits me is what makes me want to keep coming back and doing it again.
Thank you. Anne?
This might be cheesy, but for me, it is a chorus line. As a show in general, it's the iconic What I Did for Love. I look at the screen even on just the choreographers here. And, I've known some of these people since the late 1980s, and everyone is still doing what they love. Sorry, Jeff. Everyone is still doing what they love, year after year. And in the show, they talk about the red shoes. Well, chorus line was my red shoes. And then I got to learn it for the first time. I would listen to the soundtrack over and over and over again, and I would always listen to Cassie's dance, and that orchestration was just like in me. And then I got to finally learn it through Lynn, and it always brings me back. I've had the pleasure I've choreographed it. I've played Cassie again. I've directed it now. And it always brings me back to my Buffalo home. So it's like that show in general, and it also was obviously choreographed initially by Michael Bennett. And of course you have to kind of use a lot of the original choreography. So that's also my tie to Buffalo, but it just kind of encompasses so many different aspects for me.
Thank you. I think, Jeffrey, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of, I'm not confused about what the question is, but I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, and it'll be probably fine. But when you first asked the question, what came up for me was there's a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers number from the movie Swing Time called "Never Gonna Dance." And in this number, you see, over this 6-minute number, you see their entire relationship depicted in the number, how they met, how did their relationship develop, and then at the end of the number, they're broken apart and they have to leave each other. And that always stands kind of as a bar when I'm choreographing something and saying, okay, am I just moving people around on stage to make pretty pictures? Or am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I leading the audience through the story? Am I giving them the themes? And so that's one that I always use. And it was mind-blowing to me when I watched it for the first time. And it just remains as kind of a bar that I use to try to make sure that I'm doing my job as a choreographer.
Excellent. Anybody else with this one? And if not, we can move on. We do have a bunch of audience questions. So I think that's where we're gonna take it. There's been lots of stuff popping up in here as we've been going. In the same vein of where we just were, a question from Sarah. Do any of you have famous choreographers' style that influences your own work, or that you definitely took as inspiration when you kind of developed your own personal style of vernacular? Jeffrey?
When I first came to New York, I worked with Wayne Cilento for a solid 4 years between 2 shows. And his composition, the idea of stage picture, the idea of just all of the things that he learned from his own artistry, but also from working with Michael Bennett and Bob Fosse. It was mind-blowing. It was like, oh my God, wow, this is incredible. And especially for someone who is much shorter than me, to be able to create movement that at 6'1", I felt completely confident doing, and didn't feel like it was created for short people or anything. It was universal for everyone. Everyone felt good doing it. Everyone felt like it was cathartic. And that definitely influenced my choreography.
Absolutely. Michael?
I can say Bob Fosse really influenced me, especially, starting at 19 and walking into a class with Lynn in the early 90s when for me, I was coming out of the closet and I was looking for a home. And I walked into this class and Lynn taught me something that I could understand because I didn't have any sort of background of dance. So all it took was something like this to ignite the spark of this language, where it allowed me to find a safe place. And from here, it went to a role. It was gestural. It was something that I wasn't afraid of doing. From a hand, it went to a gestural eye movement. It turned into a pedestrian walk, which turned into a cakewalk, which turned into a whole sequence of things. So it's just the minute spark of a tip of a hat that was Fosse, taught by Lynn, really helped form and save this little 19-year-old who didn't have a place to go. So dance really helped me at that time in my life. So, and Ann was there, and Doug was there, and Kathy was there, and Jeff was there, Johnny was there. It was great. So these people are my family. So for me, this is a family reunion. And like I said earlier, we got to do it more often. So I thank all of you for everything that you've done.
Lynn?
So, Michael, I love you so much. You know that. And Michael's story is not unique. There are so many people that find their home in theater, find their home in dance. It is, art is so important, which is one of the reasons why this pandemic is stealing, something from the world. And thank God that MusicalFare tries to keep things alive and in some way, shape, or form. For me, I talked about the movie musicals. I already talked about Jerome Robbins, but when I was a freshman in high school, my dad was in the furniture business and he would go to market every year. He saw every Broadway show. My first Broadway show was Ethel Merman in Hello, Dolly. But it wasn't Ethel that really slayed me. It was Gower Champion's work on the stage, and watching that live. And I will never forget, Georgia Engel played Minnie Fay, and seeing her in the middle of the dancing number get caught over Barnaby's head, and she does this take down, she does a take to the audience, and then she like collapses. And all those things are like indelibly stamped. So I'm going to say the first time that I saw live the work of Gower Champion, and my dad said to me, do you know who that man is in the front row? And it was Gower Champion. He was there that night. So the food, the whole series in the restaurant with Dolly went on forever because she did this whole exchange with Gower Champion. I wore a yellow dress. I will never forget.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Anyone else have, Johnny?
The only thing I would add, you know, as we all talk about mentorship, I think, and everybody's of course filled this evening with their mentorship from Lynn. And Lynn, you've always, we're contemporaries, but you were the one that did that. As far as style, you can't pin Lynn on a style because Lynn does every style. So there's no way to do that. But as time has gone on, and when you finally get to people that I knew in New York as well, Maurice Hines, all of those people that came along, and they didn't just give you steps. They were also telling you a story at the same time, or they'd stop rehearsal cold and tell you a story. Or, you know, all of these things would just continue to happen. And as it filled your mind and as it filled your spirit, it was able to come out of your body in a certain way. And those are the things that I think are some of the most important things that anybody, whether you're an artist or not, can really take home.
Absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. Another question we had from the audience that kind of goes to what Lynn was saying about how this time is so challenging because the arts have been pulled from us in such a dramatic way is from Tom. And he said, what recommendations do you have for aspiring performers as the industry has changed due to COVID? And if you have any advice for performers during this transition. Transition is also a hard word because we hope it comes back to where we were, but just during this period of kind of uncertainty. Anne?
I would just say, like the rest of us, using the technology to your advantage. A lot of times, like even just taking master classes or workshops or things like that, you can't do because you have to go to New York, or you have to go down to Florida, or you have to go to Chicago, and you have to, you know, pay all this money. There's just a lot of resources right now, and even Broadway performers trying to make a living as well, so they're trying to do other things. But if you do enough research on the internet right now, I feel like you have a lot more outlet via the internet. To even have, you know, Zoom one-on-one lessons, or there's all kinds of master classes and workshops right now going on with all across the boards. So it's one little outlet. Use more resources.
Jeffrey?
I've actually been teaching online. I shifted over and started teaching. I did a theater camp over the summer. I did monologue training, song study. I tell my students, keep training. A teacher once told me, if you do not practice for one day, you know it. If you don't practice for 2 days, I know it. And if you don't practice for 3 days, everybody knows it. So all of my students, I just tell them there are many, many ways of being a good artist. Mostly it has to do with being a good human being, but actually being a researcher and doing a deep dive. Pick any performer that you love, and whether they're in Hamilton or Hadestown or whatever, and do a deep dive. Analyze them, see what it is about their performance that you admire, and not to copy them, but to be inspired by them, and to see how you would sing that song that they're singing on YouTube. So I think that this time, while it is a pause, it's still valuable, and we can come out of it better than we were going into it. We can keep training. We can keep exciting our senses and imagination. That's something we can do wherever we are. So,
Michael?
I think it's also important that creatives realize that they are their own business owners, and they can take this time to really not tell the stories of characters, but tell the story of themselves, and really think about their own business, and get their resume ready, get their personal brand ready, get all their social medias aligned with consistency of messaging. This is especially important for kids in college, kids that are getting ready to go to New York, or pursue this as a career, that they need to think, they need to take time, not just to tell the stories of others, but they need to take time to think internally and get their own stuff together at the same time. It's very important.
Absolutely. Lynn, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I was just going to say that in addition to the immersing yourself in the media and utilizing all of that, because that's a wonderful thing, and definitely keep training, but it would be great to also take a step back to old school, researching by reading, researching and listening to music that isn't maybe even musical theater, but that still paints the pictures in your brain, taking yourself out of the media world so that your imagination creates what it is going to do next as far as art goes, whether it's writing, telling your own stories, writing your own play, making whatever dance choreography you're going to do. It's nice to take it back old school too, and use this time where you're not having to be in 5,000 places at one time.
Absolutely. Another question we have in here, which I think is a good one, is from Jesse, and it says, "What are the key things that you look for in a dancer during an audition?" Doug?
I want an actor. That's really it.
And sing.
I want someone. I don't care if you can sing really, really well. That's beautiful, and I'm glad you have a great voice. But you need to actually be able to tell me the story, and you have to be a storyteller. In one of Michael's favorite words, in phrases, and I completely agree with that. It's not. That's what I'm looking for in any dancer. If you can't point your toe perfectly, we can fix that. If you can't tell a story, that's going to take a lot longer to fix than pointing your toe.
Mm-hmm. Kathy?
Sorry. I also, yes, I'm way with Doug on that. And also their personality. Huge to me. If you're a person that's gonna be easy to work with and is fun and nice and brings a good energy to the room, that is everything to me. Over somebody that's just uber talented and not like that. So that would be my thing.
Anne?
I'm with Doug and Kathy for sure. And also, I always tell my students eyes are really important. Someone's eyes. If they're on the floor, I can't see them. Then they'll be on the floor on stage. Again, with Doug, sure, we can get your foot pointed. We can get your leg where it needs to be. We can get details. Details in choreography is another one, I would say, in the audition process. I kind of like to see who's paying attention to those types of things to make the job kind of easier within the rehearsal process. But my number one thing is always eyes. I always tell my kids, whether you like or don't like cats, what's the whole poster? The eyes. Because if you had a kitten doing this the whole time, they're not going to be very interesting at all. So I always use that as an analogy for them. And then the second thing is, I lost my train of thought. There's something along the lines Kathy said. If I think of it, I'll come back.
The cats, they got you. Michael?
I look for confidence. I think there's confidence to succeed, but there's also, I look for someone to have enough confidence to fail and to mess up. And if you mess up big. And that's how I know that you need to be, we need to talk about something and something needs to be fixed. But if someone comes in a bit timid and stands in the back and doesn't really engage, then I don't know if they're going to be a good storyteller at that point. So confidence is really important to my process.
Excellent. And so I think it's about time to end. We have 5 minutes left, so I'll ask this last question that we have in the chat, and then we'll wrap things up. This is from Darlene, and the question was, what is the most challenging show or project that you feel you have choreographed, and why? Lynn?
For me, it was Tarzan, because you had to blend together the aerial artistry with dance and movement. You had to create the apes in addition to the humans. And there's a lot of dialogue in the show, whether people realize it or not. So working with collaborators and how the artistry of the aerials was going to work into musical theater was very, very challenging. And working on the set, which it went around the entire theater. It had a passerelle that was at the balcony level. So, so people could swing in and out, and it had a turntable, and it had a hydraulic tree that came up, and all this LED. So that was very, very challenging, because the technical elements combining with the aerial choreography that had to be integrated into a dramatic show was tough.
I can imagine that sounds insane. Jeffrey?
In 2013, I got the opportunity to choreograph West Side Story at Algonquin Playhouse. And the director and I talked about it for a long time, and I really wanted to do my own thing. And I know that might sound like, sacrilegious because of Jerome Robbins, but I believe that everybody should be allowed to have their shot at choreographing the things that we might put up on pedestals. I think it's, so it was, I was like, oh my God, I got the show. Oh my God, I got the show. So it was daunting, and it should be. But I was very, very proud of what I ended up with, and I got another chance to do it again, but it definitely was the most difficult, mainly because I think of the pressure that I was putting on myself, as I think everybody in this room would, to live up to the show and to give the dancers and the actors something that they were going to be proud to do 8 times a week. But it was definitely, that was a big one.
Well, and I'm sure you feel pressure, whether or not it's warranted, that the audience is like, okay, well, if you haven't done the Robbins, and what are you doing? Which is unfair, but I think I can see how that gets in your head and just kind of freaks you out unnecessarily.
Sure.
Bobby,
Totally.
You had your hand up as well.
Yeah, my second year at I'm at Williamsville South, neighbors to Christie. And I've been there a long time as well, which has been wonderful. But our second year, God bless the director, Roger Paolini, who's a dear friend of mine. I love him. And the vocal director were like, we're going to do Thoroughly Modern Millie. And I loved the show. And I was like, okay, where are our dancers? And we had just done Sound of Music with 3 guys and 17,000 women. And so we did it, and with no tappers, and I unfortunately didn't have a dance gym like Christy does, and it was, I came in with everything prepared and ready to go, and we were so not even anywhere ready to do any of the stuff that I had ready. So it was a wonderful experience in learning on how to adjust at the moment and be really, really nurturing to these kids. And now I look back on that DVD and I think, wow, they accomplished this, knowing that some of them didn't even know their left from their right and where we came from. But in the midst of it, I was like, get me out of here. But I'm glad I stuck through it, and I'm glad that those students had that experience.
Michael?
So I work at Ingram Micro. I'm a marketing professional for Apple. And we have around 4,000 total employees across the country, but at our campus in Buffalo, we have 1,800. And we have a sales banquet every January. And they wanted to do something. They were like, we want to focus on highlighting teamwork. And I was like, great, I'll get sales reps together and I will choreograph a dance. And we will present it to 3,000 people. And they said, try it. So I got 24 sales reps, no dance experience. And we did an entire hip hop dance in front of 2,500 sales reps and executives and the president of the company. And it was scary and incredible. And they had us do it the next year as well. So dance and theater in a corporate setting is incredible. If you get a chance to do it, I highly recommend it.
Lynn?
I just wanted to tag on to that. One year when I was at Universal, I choreographed for Bill Gates and his crew. I did with he and his executives. I did I'm Nothing Without You. And then I was on this huge scaffolding and the entire Microsoft, all these execs, right? They were doing I Can't Touch This. And we choreographed it. It was crazy. And filmed it, and then they played at their banquet. So I know what you're talking about. It's nuts.
I love that. Well, I think that's that image of Bill Gates and the executives is where we should end it. So thank you all so much for your time tonight. Thank you all for joining to watch, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
And thank you, Michael.
Thanks.